Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming at this early hour. I wish to thank the organizers for inviting me, although I must confess that when I read the invitation coming from Ingrid and Nina, I felt bad. The feeling was jealousy, that we don't have such an organization in Poland, that why all the directors of museums, theaters, and so on know that audience development is a challenge for Polish institutions. We don't make it systematically. We talk about it, but we don't make it systematically. And in a way, it confirms my prejudice about Norwegians. We have some joint projects with Norwegian partners, and these projects always stood out as the best organized. I mean, our Norwegian partners, the Falstead Center, the Jewish Museum in Oslo, the HL Center every time we do something together, I know it's well prepared. So I envy what you do now. So let me share with you some experiences that we have in a very young institution. This week, we are having the 2nd anniversary of the opening of our core exhibition. And in this short period, we've got some success, actually maybe more appreciation than we deserve, but still, I must admit that we have some appreciation. And I would like to share with you some of my observations as the director of the museum, but also as a historian. I am a scholar. So I do my job, and at the same time, I watch my institution, what does it do? And what is the environment that we have to respond to? So here you can see the building, which we opened 2013. The building is new, the institution is new, the core exhibition is even younger. But the place it remains is of particular importance because the place and the story we tell define the character of the institution. Actually, our mission, the mission of the POLIN Museum, is to recover and cultivate the memory of the history of Polish Jews, to recover because it's been largely lost, especially younger generation knows almost nothing about it, and the old generation that still may remember Polish Jews, the Polish Jewish world that vanished during the German occupation, during the Second World War, is passing away. So we have a double role of bringing back certain past and cultivating as long as it remains. And the place is important because the place, the museum is located in the northwestern part of Warsaw, which up to 1940s was the biggest Jewish city in Europe. Jews made more than 30% of the population of Warsaw. And in this part of Warsaw, they made 80 to 90% of all the inhabitants. So there was a non-Jewish minority among the Jewish. It was a fully Jewish world. And then it was the biggest ghetto in Europe. Poland had not known ghettos in the Middle Ages. It was the new institutions introduced by the Nazis to Warsaw, which made this part of Warsaw actually a big concentration camp in the middle of the city. And then they destroyed it. Most of the prisoners of the ghetto were deported to the death camp of Treblinka, and then the ghetto was razed down, virtually razed down. This is the place where the museum is standing now. It was, as you see, a sea of ruins, almost nothing. And until early 1960s, this part of the city was not rebuilt. It was only in the 1960s that you can see very typical socialist housing projects, yes, functional, with a hidden ideology, which now I can understand. For example, it was cheap, it was accessible, it was the housing district for the new socialist worker with small kitchens, very small kitchens. And architecture is a powerful language. It speaks, big family is not a good family, kitchen is the place to meet. And of course, that was not a deliberate part of the ideology, but this is the entourage. You can see the monument, Nathan Rapoport monument of 1948 to the heroes and martyrs of the Warsaw Ghetto, probably the best known monument of Warsaw, and an empty square. Instead of ruins, we had the square, and then the city gave this part of land for our museum. But it was not only about a place for construction. It was about a place with history and how to tell this history. So here it is. In front of the monument, you see this beautiful building. We love it. I mean, the employees of the museum love it. The building got 3 architectural awards by the Polish Union of Architects, the Finnish Union of Architects, and last week also by the Czech Union of Architects. The Finnish connection is very clear. It was designed by a Finnish architect, a man who had been unknown in Poland, But he won the competition against the biggest names in architecture. Actually, I believed that Daniel Libeskind, who is a great architect, the Jewish Museum in Berlin is his design, the Ground Zero Memorial in New York is his design, and he is a Polish Jew. But Rainer Malamaki offered something which I think you may like. A building which is simple outside, is very restrained. It's a little bit similar to this building. It's modest when you approach it, and the beauty is hidden within in the main lobby, which I'll show. But why the modest is important? It does not dominate the monument. The monument is more important than even the most interesting ego of any architect that could have designed the building. So we remain as the museum in a relation to this object, the most important object in this space. Actually, there are no old buildings. Everything was destroyed in 1943, 1944 by the Germans. So we are in a relation to this building, and we are a part of a memorial complex, of a Holocaust memorial complex. Because in addition to this monument, there is a number of smaller monuments to personalities, organizations, mostly Jewish, but also some Polish righteous among the nations. And we are a part of it. And this tension is important, but it's a tension, because this is a tension between what this museum is about. Erecting a museum in a site of the Holocaust, site-specific museum in the middle of the Warsaw Ghetto, is a way of commemorating its victims. But since the beginning of the idea of the museum, it was very clear that this is not going to be a Holocaust museum. And we stress it all the time. While you have, actually the model of the museum, the Historical Narrative Museum, comes from Washington, D.C. The first big narrative museum was the Holocaust Memorial in Washington, D.C. But we stress it, that this museum is the museum of 1,000 years of Jewish life in Poland. Holocaust is a part of it, the most dramatic, the most tragic part, but a part of it, and not the last part of it. So as I said, that the building is modest from outside and the beauty is hidden. So this is the beauty. This is the charisma, as Rainer Malamaki calls it, our main lobby, which looks like a canyon. It looks very organic. And many people who enter this lobby ask, what is the meaning of it? Architecture doesn't have to have a meaning. It's an abstract art. But I like that people believe there should be a meaning, because museums are institutions of meaning. What we deliver to the public is a set of meanings. I have a friend who is a businessman, and once when he visited the museums, he asked me, so what do you produce? What is a business here? What do you manufacture? And I thought a little bit, and I said, well, we don't work in manufacturing. It's rather mining. We extract meanings from the past and show it to our audience, and it's not fully processed, it's semi-processed, and our audience is developing its own personal narratives on the basis of the objects that we show, objects, pictures, quotations, all the means that we use to convey the past. Because this is a museum which is different to classical 19th century museums that begin with a collection and then they have some space to show the beautiful collection. Our museum started with a simple idea to show the history of Polish Jews. And history is the story about the past. So in this sentence, you have the act of showing the visual and the storytelling of the past, and it's combined. We use many words, probably too many of them. When you come to Warsaw, all of you are invited. Actually, you can get a discount ticket if you come. We tell a story using visual means, but more than visual means, and I will speak about it in a second. But what is important in this expectations that there is a meaning, I think this is crucial for our visit. This is what I would like them to do, to seek something meaningful. And there is a demand for the meaning, I see it. Because we have already had, in less than 2 years of operation of the core exhibition, 700,000 visitors, the number we never expected, actually more than we expected, more than the firemen regulations expected at times. As you know, this is serious when you cannot break it. So we told the story of 1,000 years of Jewish life. I'll do the Holocaust Gallery. The Shoah Gallery is the biggest one, and for many people is the most powerful one. But there is a number of decisions that we've made in balancing the story of life and the story of death, which is difficult, and is a hidden tension, but this is a tension which makes it relevant, which makes it debated up to the present. All the core exhibition is underground, it's hidden. Actually, it's only 40% of the building space. I think it conveys that our museum is much more than the core exhibition. Most of our space, I mean, when we set aside office space, a significant part of it is an auditorium of maybe this size for 500 visitors, where we have concerts, public lectures, and so on. And then we have also educational center. We do a lot of education, and we primarily believe that a museum is an educational institution, at least the historical museum like ours. And the story we tell imposes some constraints. For example, it's chronological. We start in the Middle Ages. So this is the first hero, Ibrahim ibn Yaqub, a Jew from Cordoba, a Spanish Jew. And you may note inscription in Arabic. We always use quotation in the original language. Why in Arabic? Because he was writing in Arabic. And today, for many people, it's surprising that you may have a Jew writing in Arabic to his Muslim king, because he was a kind of a spy, this gentleman. He was sent to Eastern Europe on an intelligence mission. So we like to surprise the visitors. And there are plenty of things to surprise them, because usually they are fairly ignorant. The knowledge is very limited. And there is nothing wrong about it. You know, you cannot know everything. And today you must know plenty of things, how to operate complex machinery. And the knowledge of the past, especially distant past, is very limited. So we are very happy that we can deliver this knowledge in a way which is understandable for visitors coming from various countries, educational levels, and so on. So going across it, here you have our maybe most beautiful and certainly the biggest object that we have. This is a wooden synagogue from a little town of Gwoździec, which we reconstructed. And it's colorful, it's beautiful, but there is a hidden story. Behind every object that we show, there is a hidden story, which you may explore when you have some more time and can use the multimedia. We reconstructed the synagogue using the technologies and techniques available in the 17th century. No electric drillers. It took 2 years. It was very labor-intensive. But it's authentic in a different way. Okay? It's not just a copy. It's a copy made in a very special way. And across the 19th century, here we have a railway station. We talk about modernity, how modernity, new means of transport, industry, new means of communications, ideas, change the world. We approach the interwar Poland. This is how we call the Jewish streets, showing the richness of Jewish cultural, social, political life. At that time, Jews made 10% of the population in Poland, but they made 30% of the Polish urban population. So it was 30% in Warsaw, but in many small towns it was 70% or 60%. So these were, complete communities. And all of them vanished. This is a part of our Holocaust Gallery. Actually, we make an effort to suspend the knowledge of the visitor about what happened during the war. Because if you keep thinking about it, you cannot understand the people of the 16th century, of the 17th century, who didn't know it. It would have been absurd to assume this, and this is a major impediment. So this is one of these tensions that I have mentioned. How to talk about the long story, not to making the Holocaust shadowing back. The Holocaust puts a shadow on us, onto its future, but not backwards. Speaking about it, I must mention that the production of the core exhibition, it took many years actually, it took 20 years to build this museum. And for many years the major constraint was insufficient funding. But now I see it was a blessing, because there was not enough money to build the building, but there was enough money for research and discussion. So there was a lot of reflection. There is a lot of reflection behind almost every object. I will show you here. You can see these are very small photographs which are then enlarged here. There is a photograph of a German soldier cutting the beard of an old Jew. And when I came to this, I was not involved in the production of this part. I asked my colleague, Professor Jacek Leociak, Jacek, you've made a mistake. This is too small. No one can see it, and you must bow to see it. And he said, no, it's deliberate. I want you to bow. I want you to bow because the man which you can see there was humiliated already twice when a soldier was cutting his beard and then when he had to pose in front of a camera of another soldier. I'm not going to make you humiliate him for the third time. You will bow to a small picture. So there is a lot of thinking behind how to present the story. But the debates between historians and curators were very, I would say, vivid. No human losses, thanks God, but sometimes it was close to. And now, as a historian, I must confess, curators were right, because they knew that you cannot show too much, that you must be very selective. And historians wanted to tell more and more because we believe it's so important. Now, curators were right. Less is more. Less you show, the greater impact you can make. And there are hidden narratives in it. This is the communist period, my favorite place, actually. You have recreated a Jewish community center. In the Stalin era, you can see Comrade Stalin here, and then in the 1960s, no more Comrade Stalin. The big change of 1956, the communist bloc, which really made a difference, that, for example, you can be religious and this is tolerated, which was very difficult at that time. And this is separated by the Venetian glass. From this place, you cannot see this place, but from this place, you can look back into the past. And this is the past. This is something that we can remember. We don't know what's tomorrow, but we know what was the past. And I think this is the best metaphor of history that I know. So in the core exhibition, and now speaking about the responsibility of the museum, we have some meta-narratives, some hidden narratives. I don't mean we manipulate our visitors. No, it's simply some complex conclusions that are somehow included into the many details that we show. And one of them is that Poland historically was a very diverse country, one of the most diverse in Europe. It's been only since the Second World War, with the genocide committed by the Germans on the Jews, then with the deportation of the Germans, then with the change of the borders where Ukrainians, Lithuanians, and Belarusians were left in the Soviet Union, that Poland became one of the most homogeneous nations in Europe. And this is, I would say, a few percent of Polish history, a certain anomaly. Moreover, it seems it will end because of migration. And so, but we can use our past to prepare for the future. We can apply critical thinking and realize, well, Jews made an organic part of Polish history. You cannot understand history of Poland without the Jews. While the history textbooks that I was using as a kid in communist Poland didn't mention minorities. History of Poland was the history of ethnic Poles only, which was a gross misrepresentation. So now we somehow compensate for it, showing, well, this is the history of our country. But what does it mean? It means that people who, for many ethnic Poles, Polish-speaking Roman Catholics, are them, were us. And this changes a lot. What are the borders of the imagined community? So retroactively, we change the understanding of who are we or who were we back in the 19th or 17th century. And second, that diversity is given, maybe God-given. I mean, it's natural, it happens to be, and the question is, how do you manage it? And it happened that the golden era of history of Poland, 16th, 17th century, when Poland was one of the biggest states in Europe, powerful, rich, culturally rich, happened also to be the moment of the greatest diversity, when Polish-speaking Catholics made less than 50% of the population. And they did it somehow, so this is not a curse. It may be an asset. Or you can fail and actually produce horrible results, but these results are never horrible just for a minority. Sooner or later, horrible for everyone. This is our last section about the history after 1989 in democratic Poland. And there are two messages in it. One is that the history we are telling has not ended. It's going on. Many people believe it has ended back in 1945. Not, it isn't. Second, it's strange for a museum that you tell a story that doesn't have an end. 10 years from now, we'll have to add something, because now will be the past. But I like it because it makes our museum an ongoing project, unending project. You never make the museum final. There is no such thing as a final stage of the core exhibition. This is the stage of our core exhibition for 3-5 years. Then we'll have to change it. And I think it's good to leave it open because it encourages discussion. including criticism. Speaking about criticism and discussion, I must mention the political process, because there is always some politics behind cultural institutions. And when as a historian, I watch the history of the museum that I currently manage, I see it as a series of miracles that it happened. I mean, seriously, miracles. I mean it. When people ask me if I believe in miracles, I say, no, I rely on them. And I think many of you do the same. And not only for budgetary reasons, for many reasons. And thinking about what was the most important miracle that happened in the creation of this museum was that all the stakeholders that were involved, and there were several groups. It began with historians. A group of historians went to Washington, D.C. They realized, oh, you have this great Holocaust Memorial Museum. It's great, but we want to make it for the whole history of Polish Jews. But they didn't have money. They had just an idea. Then came an association, Friends of the Jewish Historical Institute, basically representing the Jewish community of Warsaw and some scholars. And then this association convinced the city politicians, we should have this museum in Warsaw. And it took them a few years to make it. And then the city politicians realized that it may be costly, and they convinced the national level politicians, the Ministry of Culture. And altogether, they established the museum. So our museum is a public-private partnership between the city of Warsaw, the Ministry of Culture, the national government, and the Association of the Friends of the Jewish Historical Institute, basically a private association. So this complex group of stakeholders, how much time it takes me to establish a budget, you can imagine. But the mystery, the miracle was that all the stakeholders were humble enough to realize that they cannot make it alone, that they need everybody else. That was the precondition. If one of them was proud enough to believe I can make it on my own and my own way, it would have failed. This way, they had to negotiate. And what they negotiated was to keep themselves at a distance from historians and curators. They were not involved. There was a museum council. They could express their opinions in a formal setting, but they couldn't call a curator or a historian and say, listen, I don't like how you're going to make it. That was impossible. And I think that was crucial. They were wise enough to keep a distance. Politicians help people. I understand it. But sometimes that may hinder a good project. So first the discussions between historians and curators, and then the discussions between the stakeholders, and the providence protecting all of this made the museum eventually happen, came into being. And here, as I said, in the core exhibition alone, we have had 700,000 visitors. We've got, this year, we are the European Museum of the Year. For the first time, a Polish museum got this great title. And next month, we are going to Riga for another ceremony. We have been awarded the European Museum Academy Prize. And again, no Polish museum in the past got this award. So for the first time, we've got not only one, but two of these awards. We have thousands of press clippings. Virtually all Polish media commented upon the museum, and only 5 critically. And we have hundreds, if not thousands, of media clippings from international media, including full-page article in The Economist, which I never expected. And almost all of them positives. Sometimes I'm a little bit afraid that we should have some enemies. Of course, we have some enemies, but they are so marginal. So we are looking forward to some more enemies in the future. But what is most important, visitors like it. We make exit poll. When visitors leave the core exhibition, we select on a random basis and ask them question. One of the questions is a standard question on consumer satisfaction. Would you advise your family and friends to visit this museum? Between 87 and 95% say strongly yes or yes. Well, people buy the newest BMW, and they are not as happy as with this museum. And this is not a Disneyland. This is not a theme park. This is not a place to enjoy. We show difficult history at moments, and still they like it. And I think this is that we respond to this desire for meaning. And we respond in a way which is respectful to the people who even don't share our opinions. And this is what they like. So this is a few of our awards. My grandmother always told me to remain modest, but it's very difficult to be modest when you run this institution. So here you can see the skyline of Warsaw with our museum. It's a morning. You see it's bright. It looks like the future is bright. I don't know if the future is bright. The future is certainly complex. There are some clouds over my country and over Europe. But I think that the way we tell the past to our visitors, it prepares them for understanding that it was complex, it is complex, and it will be complex. And the complexity requires reflection. And reflective responses to the challenges of the present and challenges of the future are much better than simply emotional responses to it. And I think we do it right, although I must say that we don't know how exactly it works. We need to make some research. We are planning some research for the next year to find out what actually people think when they leave the museum, and especially what they think 6 months later, when this first emotions settle down. It's a mystery. I don't know if you make this kind of research with your institutions, but I realize that, in fact, no one in Poland has made a research, longitudinal research, several months afterwards. What remains in people's heads and hearts after such visits? So I'm looking forward to our future. In the discussion, I will be very glad to answer any of your questions. Thank you very much for your attention.